Thank you guys for coming out today. I know it's a hot, sweltering day, and we're going to sweat a little bit here, but thank you all for coming here. I'm at wirepoints.com. I was with the Illinois Policy Institute for about 6 years and felt like I was ready to have a different voice, my own voice, and I'm working with a partner named Mark Glennon, and he's had the wirepoints.com site for a few years, but we're trying to make it, get it to the point where we're helping Illinoisans connect the dots better between the pains in their communities, the mess in their communities, and the policies that are being put in place by our politicians in Illinois. That's our real objective. And our other objective, of course, is to tell the truth, because there's not many people left who tell the truth in Illinois, certainly not of the people we want to count on. People ask me why I do what I do. Why do I try to reform Illinois? Why are we trying to fix Illinois? They tell me it's hopeless. I'm curious from the crowd we have here. How many of you think Illinois is hopeless? All right, 4 or 5, yeah, okay, the hands started to go up and people are like, yeah. Well, you know, it's interesting, right? If Illinois is hopeless, and I think many people think it is, it's why people are leaving the state, right? Migration. Some people can't wait for the state to turn around. Some people have a better opportunity somewhere else. Somewhere their property taxes are lower, or their kids will have a better environment. They're leaving for lots of reasons. Some of us are still here, right? So we have to think about how we want to have our, what's our attitude? Do we want to say it's hopeless? I argue that we don't. And the reason I fight this is because I'm optimistic that we can fix Illinois. It's a matter of time. It's a matter of math. The math will eventually work in our favor. And it's a matter of when enough people finally stop being hoodwinked, lied to, confused by the government and the other political elite. Once we all figure it out, we're going to turn this thing around. And it's understandable why people are confused in Illinois. First of all, you'd like to think you could trust your politicians from time to time, but it's really hard to find a politician in Illinois you can trust. They'll tell you the budget is balanced. It's never been balanced. They'll tell you your taxes are low or they're not that high. It's not true. They'll try to tell you that people aren't leaving the state. It's not true, right? They tell you that we don't spend enough. If we only spent more, we'd have more people stay here in Illinois. So they tell you that kind of stuff. So if you can't trust your politician, well, hopefully you can turn to the media, and maybe there's some truth tellers in the media. But the media is as much in cahoots with the politicians, and they say the same things the politicians do. So you can't trust the media. Well, maybe you can turn to some civic organizations that you can trust. Maybe the Civic Federation or the Civic Committee or the Better Government Association. Maybe we can turn to them. But they parrot the exact same thing, that your taxes aren't that high or that people aren't really leaving the state. That's not true. So it's no wonder Illinoisans are confused. So I argue that Illinoisans aren't stupid. We're just being bamboozled. We're being hoodwinked for a while. But we're all going to wake up. And I want to tell you the story, something personal that I went through almost a decade ago, to kind of find some parallels between Poland and change and need for change and kind of a dysfunctional place that then gets a lot better. I had the chance to work in Poland for 9 years, from 1998 to 2007. So I went to Poland, 7 years, or 7 years after the Soviet Union kind of collapsed. And my father was born in Poland, so Poland was fascinating for me. I was there at a time when everything was changing. Now, obviously you can't compare Poland to Illinois, right? Poland was war-destroyed, war-stricken. It lived under 50 years of communism. But it was oppressed for a long time. And what's amazing about Poland is that these people, despite their rights being taken away, despite the destruction of the free markets, despite the destruction of a market economy, the destruction of institutions, they tried to destroy religion. For 50 years, these people refused to succumb to that pressure. And they fought it, and they waited it out until the math finally went in their favor. And once the math went in their favor, they all got together. This is Lech Walesa. They all got together and said, hey, we're done with this. And they applied pressure, and communism collapsed. One of my fondest memories that I will have as I age will be my time in Poland. Because once the math collapsed, the left and the right, everybody worked together to regroup Illinois back to a market economy. It didn't matter if they were left or right. They all knew that they had to strip the government of its power and give the power back to the people. So everything that was done was stripping power from the government and giving it back to the individual. Now, there was a lot to change, right? After 50 years of communism, there were no true property rights anymore. People's individual rights were gone. Your right to, how did you save for anything, right? Everything was broken. So they went through something called shock therapy. And they said, hey, everything is broken. We need to fix everything. And you have to remember, they destroyed everything. And what they did is they did the shock therapy, liberalized the economy, floated the currency, immediately started giving everybody rights. Companies were able to start trading, et cetera, et cetera. So next thing you know, you have an economy that has been booming for decades. It is far outpaced. Now, of course, it started from a low base, no doubt about that. But it has far outpaced all the European economies in growth per GDP. And what's amazing about Poland is that even during the Great Recession, it never had a Great Recession. It was the only major country that skipped the Great Recession. So I say all this stuff because they went through hell. And the math finally caught up with communism, and the people finally stood up. And again, I argue that in Illinois, in our own version, in our own parallel, we're kind of going through the same thing. The math is going to stop working at some point. The people are going to get finally fed up. Those of us who are here, we're all going to unite in some way. And it's going to be interesting because who knows how this happens, right? Is it a bankruptcy of Illinois? Is it some epiphany? Is it that the unions suddenly say they want to come to the table? I don't know. But I will tell you this. When it finally breaks up, the math won't work for the pensions anymore. The math won't work for the people who depend on core government services. And the math won't work for the rest of us who are trying to make ends meet. So we'll all join together at some point. I predict it. Here I am predicting it. We'll all join together to fix Illinois, and we'll be a great state again. The question is, how long does it take, and what do we do about it? Now, the reason I get really engaged and fired up about Illinois is while I was working in Poland, trying to liberalize the economy, bring back freedom to Poland, I was looking over my shoulder, way over the Atlantic, kind of like Sarah Palin did. She could see Russia. I could go from Poland and see what was happening in the U.S., and I didn't like what was happening. I saw, as we were liberating in Poland, we were actually becoming more and more, going the opposite direction in the U.S. So I wanted to come home, and I wanted to come home to where my parents immigrated. My mom came from Ecuador when she was 19. She came to Chicago. She came to Illinois. My dad escaped from Poland in 1952. Where did he end up? Chicago, in Illinois. This was the place where you could grit it out if you're immigrants. This was the place where the Great Migration, right? All the people came up from the South. People were coming from all over the world to Illinois. This is it. This was the place where you could succeed. It was a mecca of growth. And we've lost it. But, Illinois didn't change, right? What changed is its politicians. Yeah, there's a lot of the culture. The culture's not quite right now in terms of the free market thinking. But I think we can get it back. And that's why we do what we do. And that's why, I do things like at Wire Points, and that's why many of you here are engaged. And we're happy to engage with all of you. So several things have to happen for us to get to that math problem. And there's a lot that we have to be prepared for. One of the most important things about, and Milton Friedman said it, right? We have to have the ideas ready and in place so when things fall apart, the right ideas are taken and used. So this is why I say we have to be careful of being hopeless, because we won't be prepared when the math problem happens. We need to be prepared, organized, and have the best ideas come up. So that means we need to start right now on a lot of things. One is we got to flip the narratives. Right? We can't let the narratives that have been running in this state for so long continue. We got to flip the narratives. And then Dan Proft will be here later, and he'll talk about how we flip the politics. And they go hand in hand, but we got to do those things. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the narratives. And this is just more related to Illinois now. I got 7 narratives I'm going to cover, and depending on time, I can cut them short or continue them. The first one we got to flip is pensions are underfunded. It's the biggest lie we have going on in Illinois. Yes, they are missing lots of money, but when they say this, that you didn't fund my pensions, what they're trying to imply is the taxpayers didn't put enough, as if you guys didn't do your job. You guys don't pay enough taxes. But what we've done at WirePoints, and this is, it took me years to get there, but we looked at the growth in the pension promises. And when you look at the growth in pension promises, you realize that, I don't care how fast you put money in that dadgum thing, you'll never keep up because they keep handing out the benefits. Either more benefits or there's more beneficiaries. And that'll kind of show up as we go along in this presentation. So we ran the numbers. So go back 30 years, around the time that Mike Madigan came in office. That's just coincidental. Pension benefits. So we used to owe all the active workers and the beneficiaries about $18 billion back in 1987. Today we owe them almost $200 billion. So that's a 1,061% growth in how much we owe in benefits now versus 30 years ago. Now, to give you the best measure of comparison, inflation is up 111%. People's salaries in the private sector are barely keeping up with inflation over those last 30 years. A little bit over. Pension benefits, in some, what is that, 10 times inflation? This is the point that nobody in the media wants to make. We've published this, we're going to keep pushing it and pushing it until we can change the narrative. Because if we can't change this narrative, then their narrative wins. Underfunding means that you guys didn't put enough money in. And as Greg Hines from Cranes said, it's time for taxpayers to shut up and put up. That's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing when you know this truth right here. So we got to flip this narrative if we ever want to fix Illinois. The second big narrative, and I talked about pensions because they make up a quarter of the budget. The second big narrative we need to change is that Illinois doesn't spend enough on education. Sadly, Bruce Rauner joined in on this narrative. He ignored the facts on the ground. On a per-student basis, Illinois spends about $14,200 a student, based on the most recent data across all states. We spend the most in the Midwest. We spend 40% more than Kentucky, 20% more than Wisconsin. We spend a whole lot more than all these neighboring states. We spend more than every state in the Midwest on a per-student basis. So the problem is not money. The problem is, where does the money go, right? That's the big problem, and nobody wants to ask that question, at least not the people in the status quo, not that want the status quo, because it's all going to their bureaucracy, it's all going to their system. If we saw why pensions grew so much, it's because we've got a huge bureaucratic machine that sucks it up. Now, the first part is, my colleague John Klingler, who's right back here in the back, he does a lot of this financial analysis and does a great job. Since 1994, student growth in Illinois is only up 11%. The number of teachers that we've increased in Illinois in that time period is up 20%. Well, look what's really growing. We've got a 50% growth in administrators. And then you have to think about their salaries and the pensions they get. So when you see that huge growth in pensions that we've talked about, this is one of the drivers. And you guys all know we have 7,000 units of government in Illinois, the most in the nation. So guess where the money's going? So when they say you don't spend enough on education, what they're saying is you need to fund our pensions a little bit more, right? We need more bureaucrats and we need more pensions, so you guys need to put more. That's their definition of education. Where what we want is to get more money to the classrooms, get more money to the poorest school districts in the state. The money should be going to the classrooms and to those who don't have the means, those poverty-poor districts. Instead, I live in Wilmette. We have a retiring superintendent, and we calculated his lifetime pension. He will get $6.6 million of retirement for his lifetime. $6.6 million. It'll start at some 200 and something. It'll grow to 400,000, by the time he's 80. In the meantime, the people in downstate, some small district, are just asking. They spend like $7,000. They're asking for another $1,000. They want a little bit more money. And yet, all we're doing is around all these suburban neighborhoods, we're spending multi-million-dollar pensions. Talking about the education bureaucracy, Illinois has 852 school districts, which means 852 superintendents, which means 852 bookkeepers, and 852 plant managers, and et cetera, et cetera. Just huge duplication, huge. And this is, again, where education money goes to a bunch of district officers who, it's become a jobs program, as we all know. Compare Illinois to the 4 most efficient states in the nation, of the big states, the big, like 1 million plus students in population. So if you add up the number of school districts in Georgia, Florida, Virginia, and North Carolina, they have 529. That's 4 states, and they're big. Where's our money going? You know where. And the last thing I wanted to show you, we can make a huge list of the pensions of these superintendents and a huge list of the expected pensions of all the 6-figure bureaucrats. But we picked, I think this is the number 1 on the list right now. Somebody from North Shore School District 112, I think it is. Most of these superintendents retire in their mid-late 50s. Most of them will have some kind of pension that's 250 plus. And most of them are having $7, $8, $9 million pensions in their lifetime. It's phenomenal. Don't forget, these pensions grow every year at 3% automatically. No questions asked. It's no wonder our property taxes are so high. It's no wonder the kids in other areas can't get money. And there's 30,000 workers, administrators in the educational system who have a compensation total of 100,000 or more. So this thing will only grow. So number 1 was, don't buy their narrative that pensions are underfunded. They are over-promised. Number 2 is, don't buy that we need to spend more on education. What we need to do is take it out of the bureaucrats and put it back in the classrooms. Number 3, we need to expand Medicaid. This was an amazing thing for me when I first got to Illinois, when I first started working on this. There used to be 1.37 million people, right? There's about 13 million people in Illinois, going down slowly. But we used to have in 2000, 1.37 million people on Medicaid. Now it's 3.15. It's a quarter of the population, and it's headed towards a third of the population. I told somebody this, and they said, well, isn't that good? Shouldn't we have more people? It's good, we're taking care of more people. And I said, well, if you're in Springfield and you want to measure your numbers this way, sounds like you're taking care of more people. But the fact is, you're putting more and more people, you're making more and more people dependent on government. That means more and more people dependent on their health care, on the government for their health care. This is bad, because it means we're not doing a very good job of keeping people employed with good jobs so they can buy their own insurance, have private insurance. Instead, they're forced into this Medicaid system that, the way it's now, there's so many people on Medicaid that it's so diluted, the money's so diluted how it's spent, that the poorest of the poor, the most vulnerable, often can't get care because doctors don't want to see them. So the very system that we think is supposed to help our most vulnerable doesn't work. We need to totally unwind this thing, make sure that the money goes to the people who are most vulnerable, who need it most, and not have a quarter and a third of our population on what was supposed to be a safety net. This is one of my favorite. They love to say state workers, they're shucks, they're underpaid, things are tough. It's amazing once you start looking at the numbers. Now, let me be clear before I'm too crass. There are some workers that are probably underpaid. I can imagine some person who's working, in the jails, maybe as a janitor or something, right? There's some jobs that are not going to be paid that well. And maybe those need to be corrected. Why not? But the problem is when you start looking at the averages and when you start looking at the overall numbers and the benefits that on average they get, it's way too high. And again, it's why our property taxes are too high. It's why they keep raising income taxes. So number one, AFSCME, the governor has been negotiating with AFSCME for the last 3 years, trying to get some concessions from them. And they don't want to give any concessions. They want Brown, or by extension, the people here, to compromise. Well, let's look at the compromise for the last 10 years. Right? AFSCME salaries have gone up. This is base salaries. No overtime, no anything else. Just base salaries. They've gone up 43% in the last decade. The Illinois worker earnings are up only 11%. That's not enough to keep up with inflation. So the people that have to pay for those AFSCME salaries are struggling, can't even keep up with inflation, but yet AFSCME is demanding in their new contract, they've been demanding a shorter work week, more 5 weeks vacation. They want like 11% to 30% raises. They want everything. They're the ones that need to be compromising and giving taxpayers a break, but they won't. What else do they get? On the left side, for active workers, taxpayers, ordinary residents, pay 3/4 of the healthcare cost of those workers, and it amounts to $15,000 per worker, paid for by the taxpayers. And for those state workers who work 20 years or more, they get free retiree insurance, health insurance. I can ask for a show of hands, and I won't, but nobody gets retiree health insurance for free. It's not a benefit in the U.S. unless you're an Illinois government worker. So this is what we're up against. So I think what we need to do is we need to know our facts. By the way, the average AFSCME total compensation per year is $110,000. Okay, so these are the facts we need to know. I didn't mention this about wire points, but we love to be data driven. If we can't back up our facts with the numbers, and our numbers come from the official numbers, if we can't back it up, we won't say things. So we're very, very cautious, and we spend a lot of time just trying to make sure we're correct. The other thing they want to say is that you guys aren't taxed enough, right? And you hear, if you guys know Ralph Martiri from the CTBA, he's always saying that we don't tax enough. If we only taxed enough, people wouldn't leave. And he says that taxing high taxes is not a disincentive. I don't know, but he's got a different incentive base than most of us do. The reality is that we're the number one highest property taxes, 3 times higher than in Indiana. People are being squeezed out of their homes. If you go to South Cook and look at what's happening there, the effective tax rates are so high that people are being squeezed out of their homes. Then you've got seniors, who have a fixed income, and these taxes keep going up. So it's not that we're not taxed enough, we're overtaxed. We're 7th highest in sales taxes as a state. We're 10th highest in terms of income taxes, and overall we're 5th highest. So we need to not let them have that narrative. And everything we do, whoever's working in the movement, we need to challenge these narratives. As a matter of fact, the Civic Federation, which is backed by corporations and businesses who in theory would like to see a more robust and thriving economy, they support, last year before the tax hike, they wanted to see $9 billion in tax hikes. $9 billion. They only got 5, so they feel like they need more. So they're proposing let's tax retirements. They're proposing let's tax services. And of course, they want a progressive tax. So I'm not sure how a civic group who purports to represent the economy and the people who work in the economy could support all these new taxes without demanding big, big reforms. We say we should just, and these, by the way, are the 3 best things we have. We have a flat tax in Illinois. That's about the best thing we have. We don't overly tax services yet, and we don't tax retirements. We could talk about what tax reform should look like, and I'm happy to have tax reform as part of the discussion, but it should be revenue neutral. What everybody wants on the status quo side, they want to open up more fountains of taxes so they can keep dipping into all these different ones, and of course, we never can quite keep up with what the heck they're doing. The last one I want to talk about is a progressive tax solution. These guys are saying, this is a tax for the rich. right? We'll just get the rich, that's all. They need to pay their fair share. It's a fair tax. Is that true? It's amazing. Mike Madigan, just 3 weeks ago or so, he came out and said, look, we really need to look at the fair tax, the progressive tax structures of our next door neighbors. He mentioned Indiana. He accidentally got that wrong. They're a flat tax state, very low flat tax. But he mentioned, Missouri and Iowa, and et cetera. So, let's look at the numbers. Let's look at those states' current structures and see how they might treat a $70,000 a year teacher, right? The teachers probably hear their side say we need a progressive tax. Well, what do you do to a teacher? So you take a teacher with $70,000 in income, and you run the numbers, deductions and exemptions and all that stuff. And because Indiana has a nice low flat tax, that's how much that teacher would pay in Indiana for $70,000 in income. Michigan, 2.8. Now Missouri, so Michigan is also flat tax. Now Missouri is a progressive tax state, and this teacher would actually do better in Missouri than she or he currently does in Illinois. But when I click the other progressive tax states, for a $70,000, maybe somebody who's worked 20 years in the system, right? They're paying more taxes, whether it's Wisconsin, Iowa, Kentucky, or everybody's favorite, Minnesota. So it's not true what they say. The progressive taxes for people who want to keep spending more money, those rates, high rates, have to keep coming down the income scale until they tax a $70,000 teacher more than they do in Illinois right now. I think I lied. I had one more. These guys love to say that we don't have a migration problem. We're not losing that many people. People just don't want to come here. It's not a problem, right? It's amazing. What we did, and many others have done, is we looked at what the IRS says. What's interesting, the IRS has all kinds of information, as we all know, pretty powerful. They have our tax returns, and what they do is they look at where a person or a family reports their taxable income one year, and they look at it the next, and so they can see who's moved. They can see who's moved, how many were in the family by looking at dependents, and what kind of incomes left or came into a state. And so when you do the numbers, since 2000, from 2000 to 2017, and this does not include births or deaths, it doesn't include international migration. It's only people moving from different states domestically. And we have lost 1.37 million people since in that time period. So think about the taxes that left with that. Think about the energy that left with that. Now, what's amazing is we excluded Chicago because that's big, but if you sum up the population of all those cities there, it's equal to 1.37 million people. So you could look at it this way. Either we've lost, effectively we wiped out these cities off the map, right, by losing all these people. It's equivalent of that. Or you could look at it positively. If things were the opposite, and we'd actually gained all those people, if we'd gained 1.37 million people, it'd be like adding these 11 cities to our population. And think about how much more thriving our economy would be. Our tax base would be bigger. More innovation, more investment, more companies coming in to take care of these people. We have 1.37 million people less to take care of. Companies are not going to expand here. They're going to expand elsewhere. So these are the narratives that we have to challenge. It's going to take a lot, and I revert back to the Milton Friedman. We have to get our ideas ready. We have to challenge the narratives, and we have to prepare the ideas so we're ready when things change. Things aren't going to change. The reason I started with Poland is things aren't going to change until everybody gets engaged, until we're fed up enough that as a group we come together. At WirePoints, we want to help with that. To the extent that you guys can go to wirepoints.com, sign up for wirepoints.com. We'll give you the information that matters. Every day, my colleague Mark Glennon compiles the most important news from both left and right and includes it, and then we put our commentary on that on the side. And so for those of you who are ready to get more engaged, we'd love to see you sign up at wirepoints.com. Together, we can fix this. Thank you.